The next item of business is a statement by Michael Matheson on transport in a Covid-19 world. The Cabinet Secretary will take questions at the end of his statement, so there should be no interventions or interruptions. Call on Michael Matheson for up to 15 minutes. Please, Cabinet Secretary.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I'd like to provide Parliament with an update on measures we are taking in Scotland's transport system as we continue to respond proactively to the challenges presented by Covid-19 threat. I'd like firstly to thank the people of Scotland who have heeded the Government's clear advice not to travel unless it is essential. All of us need to continue in that cooperation as we begin to look at any easing of restrictions. As the First Minister noted on the publication last week of our paper Covid-19, a framework for decision making, if we all keep doing the right thing, there will be a way through and we will find it together. Our transport workers on the front line in keeping our transport network running while we have been tackling the virus have shown dedication, professionalism and resolve. My sincere thanks to all of them. I'm extremely grateful for the way in which our transport community across all modes and types of travel has assisted with the national effort, with companies and individuals going beyond business as usual to make sure that our transport system operates to keep key workers moving, essential goods flowing and essential journeys supported. In the transport sector, we have received offers of assistance including vans, cars, boats, aeroplanes and helicopters. It is genuinely remarkable and I thank everyone for these kind offers. We are liaising across Scottish Government, local authorities and with local resilience partners to establish where these offers of assistance can most effectively be deployed. Presiding Officer, since this crisis began, we have seen a consistent pattern in travel trends. The latest weekly trends summary was compiled by Transport Scotland last Tuesday, and officials will publish updated indicators again this week. However, the most recent data shows that travel is estimated to be around 1 trip per person per day, approximately 1/3 of normal levels, and almost wholly reduced to essential trips. Whilst travel by motor vehicle has continued to remain steady, 75% less than normal levels, travel by active travel modes has continued to rise. Walking activity has increased across Scotland since the low of the first week of lockdown, and cycling last week was 35% higher than the weekly average in February. Only a few people are still using public transport, with demand across all modes typically 90 to 95% less than normal. So in this context, Presiding Officer, the Government's first priority has been to ensure the stability and functionality of our transport system. On bus and rail, my priority has been to ensure that for essential travel and those key workers who rely on public transport, adequate transport links are in place to allow them to continue to lead the fight against Covid-19. We're ensuring essential services continue to run and protect those vital transport industries for the future by providing operators with significant financial support at a time when revenues are considerably reduced. On bus, we are maintaining concessionary travel reimbursement and bus service operator grant payments at the levels forecast prior to the impact of Covid-19, where we would typically spend over £260 million every year in supporting bus services. This arrangement will be kept under review to best support our bus industry going forward. The Scottish Government has put in place temporary variations to the ScotRail and Caledonian Sleeper franchises to minimise disruption to passengers and to rail employees. This will ensure passenger services can continue to operate during this period, albeit on a reduced timetable and in accordance with physical distancing measures. Both franchisees have agreed to these temporary variations, which will be in place for a minimum of 6 months. The First Minister has made clear the need to avoid all but essential travel to Scotland's remote and island communities. We moved early to put restrictions in place on who can travel on our ferries to protect the safety and security of our islands and remote communities, while at the same time supporting our ferry and aviation stakeholders to be able to continue to provide their lifeline services. But in order to ensure that essential connectivity is maintained between the islands and the mainland, we've agreed that CalMac can retain a level of service for those who live and work on the islands. And to maintain air connectivity, the Scottish Government has contracted Loganair to provide services between the mainland and key island destinations until the end of April. These services are available to passengers with an essential need to travel to and from the islands, including NHS patients, essential workers and people returning home. Importantly, they are also being used to move essential supplies such as blood samples, cancer treatments, as well as mail items. Feedback from island authorities is that these services are operating well during the course of April, and so I can announce today that I have asked Loganair to continue these flights until the end of May, in addition to ferry operators continuing to maintain their essential services. Presiding Officer, let me now touch on our support for patients and key workers within the health sector. Working across government, Transport Scotland have helped to produce a guidance document on the transportation of Covid-19 symptomatic patients. And my officials continue to work collaboratively with NHS Scotland to coordinate and distribute vehicles to meet emerging demands. We've received very many offers of support, but I'd like specifically to mention the support from Arnold Clark. They have directly supported patient transport by providing NHS boards with access to 120 9-seater minibuses and over 500 hire vehicles free of charge. Service providers have also adapted their timetables to accommodate the needs of key workers. The bus and rail sector are working with the NHS and other key stakeholders to ensure that key routes are being prioritised, such as those that serve medical centres and hospitals, with timetables that recognise NHS shift patterns, and operators have advised that they are altering routes where possible in light of feedback from key workers. Presiding Officer, today the First Minister has advised of guidance being published on the Scottish Government website regarding the wearing of face coverings in certain limited circumstances, such as on public transport or when shopping. This guidance is a recommendation for consideration rather than a mandatory requirement for the public. I should stress that physical distancing, hand washing and respiratory hygiene are the most important and effective measures we can all adopt to prevent the spread of coronavirus. Therefore, the wearing of facial covering must not be used as an alternative to any of these other precautions. By face coverings, we do not mean a surgical or other medical grade mask, but a covering of the mouth or nose with that made of cloth or other textiles. Presiding Officer, more broadly, my officials at Transport Scotland are currently considering how travel behaviour may change as and when Scotland moves out of the current lockdown. This work recognises that physical distancing is likely to remain for some time to come and will have implications for how our transport system is able to operate safely and support people and businesses in Scotland. As the First Minister has set out in the Covid-19 a framework for decision-making, we need to consider the new normal for transport and have a grown-up conversation about the choices that need to be made. People and businesses have a part to play in helping us to make this work. We must be open and transparent on how transport capacity will be limited because of continued physical distancing. Initial thinking suggests capacity on our public transport system could be reduced to between 10 and 25% of previous capacity levels. So we need to ensure a system-wide approach to our transport network operating within these constraints. We need many of the measures, such as working from home, which have helped to reduce demand, to continue. One of the areas I would like to highlight in terms of our transition thinking is on active travel. As I mentioned earlier, it's heartening to see an increase in the number of people cycling and walking over the past few weeks, and these are behavioural changes we want to see enduring during this public health emergency and beyond. My officials are working with Sustrans and local authorities to help ensure that people are able to walk, cycle and wheel safely during lockdown, including key workers travelling to work, people visiting the shops for essential items or taking daily exercise. This is important to support people's health and well-being, providing more space for people to keep physical distancing in a safe way. I'm therefore writing to Scotland's local authorities today, detailing a package of support to implement temporary measures to help ensure that people can be active whilst physically distancing, safe from traffic. This package consists of 100% funding for local authorities to put in place temporary measures, including pop-up cycle lanes and widening walkways, through a new Spaces for People fund of £10 million, which will be administered by Sustrans. Guidance to support local authorities on the use of existing legislation, which gives local authorities powers to quickly implement temporary road reallocation measures, and also access to a range of advice and support from within Transport Scotland and the wider Scottish Government on topics including construction, public health, equalities and on communications. Presiding Officer, I very much hope that local authorities come forward with bold, ambitious plans when it comes to implementing temporary active travel measures, following examples of other cities, towns and places around the world. Transport has a crucial role to play in the recovery of the economy, and we need to be clear about what we are thinking of doing differently in the future to aid that recovery. We must be bold in the actions to reset the system to meet our climate change ambitions, reduce inequalities, improve our health and well-being and deliver sustainable economic growth. And we're working with partners to identify issues and understand how to support organisations through the current crisis while maintaining capacity, skills, expertise and recovery swiftly. Our key aim across all modes of transport, as demonstrated by the support package for our various sectors I've already mentioned, is our operators are in a good position to recover when we start to open up again. And we're already planning a range of actions for future recovery. For instance, supporting the resurgence of a healthy bus industry will be a vital early step in Scotland's recovery. And we're working now to ensure that the right conditions are in place for Scotland's cities and regions to recover quickly to a cleaner and greener future. And I want the bus manufacturing sector and supply chain to lead on this approach. And we must also start planning now to ensure that the low-carbon vehicle supply chain can continue to have a strong presence in supporting the global shift to low-emission transport systems. A new rail recovery task force involving Network Rail, ScotRail, Caledonian Sleeper and Transport Scotland has been formed, and the group, in consultation with staff representatives, is developing a pragmatic approach to rail recovery that takes account of physical distancing and the safety of passengers and staff, using a phased increase in rail service levels. And we must start planning now for the recovery of the construction industry. Transport Scotland is undertaking an exercise to explore ways in which our major transport projects could potentially restart in the event of construction sector guidance being relaxed. Work is also underway to identify potential capital initiatives and infrastructure projects that could be progressed as part of any wider economic recovery plan should funding become available. Presiding Officer, I'd like to conclude by looking to the future. The impact of Covid-19 will have changed our economy, our society and our use of technology. We all recognise that this new normal may have to be in place for some time. The necessary changes that lie ahead will require us to adapt how we plan, deliver and manage our transport system. Addressing the uncertainties of the future will require a concerted effort of all parts of Scottish society, national, regional and local. And we will use the available evidence as it emerges to inform our policy decision making. We now have an opportunity to consider how we can sustain some of our behavioural changes, including greater home working and increased use of digital technology, both adopted rapidly during the pandemic and positively impacting on improved air quality, reduced incidents and emissions. Presiding Officer, we can now begin to shape a transport system we want and need for the future by working together on shared principles, being guided by evidence, taking focused action, and so we can ensure that the people of Scotland can prosper in the future.
The Cabinet Secretary will now take questions on the issues raised in his statement. It'd be helpful if members who wish to ask a question were to press their request to speak buttons now. And can I say to all members that we are already running late this afternoon, in part due to statements being over lengthy, but also due to what I've noticed are statements being made by members before they ask their questions. So if we want to get through everyone fairly on this statement, you'll have to be a bit more concise. I'll allow 30 minutes for questions and start, please, with Gordon Lyndhurst.
May I thank the Transport Secretary for early sight of his statement. As he will be aware, although flight and passenger numbers to Scottish airports such as Edinburgh have dropped drastically, planes are still arriving, including those from international airports or carrying passengers from connecting flights from out with the UK. Unlike some other countries in Europe and elsewhere, we have so far not adopted restrictions or mass screening or quarantine measures for those entering the country. Has the Transport Minister had discussions with the UK Government on this issue? What steps has the Scottish Government taken to protect the Scottish public from inward transmission of the virus to Scotland as a result of those returning to or entering the country? And what funding is being set aside for future measures at airports to guard against health risks?
Michael Matheson.
Presiding Officer, the member raises a very important issue about some of the ongoing debate around air connectivity and checks at airports. I can assure the member that we've had direct engagement with the UK Government on this issue. A key part of that engagement is that any change to the existing health guidance for the checks that are being implemented at our airports has to be consistent across the UK. Otherwise, it would compromise any alternative arrangements which we put in place here in Scotland. Our view is that as we start to make the transition, there is a need to review that existing guidance. Work has already been undertaken within Scotland with partners in other parts of the UK to consider whether further checks need to be implemented at our airports. So I can assure the member there is ongoing dialogue around these checks and that we continue to engage with the UK Government on what the shape of those checks should be in the future.
Colin Smith.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for advance sight of his statement. Today is International Workers' Memorial Day and I want to express my thanks to our critical transport workers who have stepped up to the mark and kept Scotland moving from delivering those essential goods to our supermarkets to ensuring that their fellow key workers, such as our NHS staff, are able to get to work to care for our loved ones. But given the substantial and welcome support previously announced for the bus and rail sector, does the Cabinet Secretary not agree it was a missed opportunity by the Scottish Government not to follow Northern Ireland and Wales and ensure that this support delivered free public transport for our key workers such as NHS staff and carers? And while I welcome the new Rail Recovery Task Force to develop a pragmatic approach to rail recovery, does the Cabinet Secretary agree that we need a similar process for the bus sector, not least given that there are more providers and passengers, to ensure that we also deliver a phased increase in bus services that is safe both for passengers and for workers?
Michael Matheson.
Presiding Officer, I echo the points that Colin Smith has made in terms of the tremendous efforts that have been made by workers right across our transport sector. And as outlined in my statement, our priority has been to make sure that we maintain and support and supplement, where necessary, travel services for those who are accessing our healthcare facilities, medical facilities and other key establishments where public transport is critical to them. And I am aware that a number of bus operators in Scotland have already chosen to implement free travel for NHS employees, but not for social care staff. Can I say to the member in relation to the Rail Recovery Task Force, the reason that the Rail Recovery Task Force has been created is specifically to deal with the complexities that there will be around the rail service. So, for example, there are real challenges with capacity in our rail service and the safety restrictions which apply to it, which create an additional layer of complexity in any recovery plan that needs to be put in place for rail services, which are not reflected in the same way as they are for the bus industry. Having said that, we are in regular dialogue with the sector to look at any recovery plans which can be put in place and to look to see what we can do to try to provide assistance as and where that is necessary. But the task force that's been set up for the rail recovery is because of the very specific regulatory challenge which will be faced by the rail network in trying to address the challenges around physical distancing while increasing levels of transport. So, for example, the way in which we would manage passengers on and off trains will be greatly complicated by the nature of social distancing, and the capacity on rail services will be greatly reduced as a result. And there are very detailed considerations presently getting into the plans around how we can manage that going forward.
Move to open questions. Mark Ruskell, to be followed by Mike Rumbles.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. It's clear that the new normal has to mean safer streets where we live, with slower traffic speeds and enough room for everyone to get around by foot or by bike without fear of injury or infection. So can I warmly welcome the new Spaces for People support package that's just been announced? And can I ask the Cabinet Secretary how you will ensure that every council seizes the opportunity and puts appropriate measures in place as quickly as possible, including temporary measures which could become permanent features of our towns and cities in the future?
Michael Matheson.
Presiding Officer, I'm grateful to the member for his question. I'm writing to all 32 local authorities today, setting out the package of measures which we're putting in place, enclosing the guidance which will provide them with the advice and information they require in order to take forward any plans through the regulatory process that they have at a local level, which they have control over, and to encourage them to be bold with their imagination and how they want to take these forward at a local level. Many of them will be very low cost and can be implemented very quickly should they choose to do so. I know from my engagement with a number of our major city local authorities is that they already have detailed plans in place that they would like to look at taking forward, and I'm keen for them to make progress with that as quickly as possible. I've got no doubt there will be some local authorities which will be more ambitious than others, and I would encourage all members here in the chamber today to encourage their own local authorities to participate in this programme and to make sure we capitalise on the benefits that can come from making greater use of the existing road space.
Mike Rumbles, to be followed by Rona Mackay.
Well, the Liberal Democrats are very pleased to see the fund for the local authorities for the temporary measures for the new cycle lanes and widening of the walkways. And the Cabinet Secretary and I spoke about this on Thursday, and he knows we fully support those measures. But on following up that question about local authorities have the are you certain they have the legal powers to implement these initiatives quickly? That's the point. But can he tell me just how quickly that he envisages these new cycle lanes and wider walkways can be actually implemented? I know he said some will be faster than others, but what's his view as how fast this can be done?
Michael Matheson.
Presiding Officer, the member is correct. We did discuss this last Thursday as an issue which I was considering. What I can say to the member is that the guidance which we are issuing to local authorities sets out the provisions within the existing legislation that local authorities have to hand where they can implement temporary measures very quickly. And when I say very quickly, in a matter of a couple of weeks. So if they have the plans and they're looking to implement them, they can accelerate that process in order to have it implemented very quickly. And the guidance gives them clear advice on that. Alongside that, we are supplementing that guidance with access to expert advice from Transport Scotland and from our other partners within the Scottish Government to provide them with any additional support and information they may require in implementing these matters. But these are issues that could be taken forward in a matter of weeks if councils are determined to do so.
Rhoda Mackay, followed by Michelle Ballantyne.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Would the Cabinet Secretary join me in encouraging local authorities to engage with third sector organisations, along with visually impaired and disabled groups, when considering innovative ways to improve active travel infrastructure? And will Transport Scotland advice include links to facilitate partnering local authorities with such organisations?
Michael Matheson.
Presiding Officer, I certainly would want to encourage local authorities to engage with organisations within the third sector and those who also represent the needs of those who may have a visual impairment or physical disability that may impair their mobility overall, which is why wheeling must be part of the mix in terms of any additional infrastructure which has been put in place. And I would expect local authorities, as part of any engagement around the plans that they are looking to take forward, is to ensure that they are considering them to ensure that they do not compromise those who may have impaired mobility and being able to either cross a road or to be able to use other pedestrian crossing facilities. So I would encourage them to do so, and the guidance and the advice which we can provide them with can point them in the right direction how they can get that advice and information.
Michelle Ballantyne, followed by Annabel Ewing.
Thank you. Scotland's coach industry is on the verge of collapse, with coach operators and related businesses of all sizes going out of business every day now. Our coach industry is the workhorse of Scottish tourism industry, supporting 1.8 million tourist journeys and equating to £850 million of value to the Scottish economy, as well as providing school transport and crisis cover when other modes of travel, such as train or air, fail. Coaches are often called to help in high-risk situations such as extreme weather. Now, with the cancellation of hundreds of thousands of pounds worth of business over this summer, the industry does now need our support. So, as the Cabinet Secretary did not mention the coach industry in his statement, will he commit now to working with the industry to ensure they can survive until 2021, when hopefully their tourist market will recover?
Michael Matheson.
Presiding Officer, the coach industry, as is the case for other businesses, are able to access the provisions which have been set out by my colleague Kate Forbes in the business support package to assist businesses across the country in a whole range of different sectors, and that's no different for the coach industry. Alongside that, COSLA have also issued guidance to advise local authorities that they should continue to pay for any school coach contracts which have been put in place until the end of the summer term. But I can say to the member that the reason I haven't directly mentioned it is because the issue is led on by my colleague Fergus Ewing, because it falls within the tourism sector. And I know that Mr Ewing and his officials have been very much engaged with the coach industry around this matter, and I have no doubt that they will wish to keep Parliament updated on any progress they make around some of the challenges which the coach sector is facing.
Annabel Ewing, followed by Sarah Boyack.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Taking into account the very, very few journeys being made, as the Cabinet Secretary referred, on our roads and indeed on our rail network at this time, can I ask the Cabinet Secretary, in looking at any potential easing of lockdown, and of course subject to appropriate risk assessment, whether consideration can be given to allowing vital road and rail repairs and maintenance to perhaps proceed? This, of course, would be timely and would also provide much needed work.
Michael Matheson.
I'm grateful to the member for her question. I can assure the member that the existing guidance allows for essential works to be undertaken, whether that be on the trunk road network or within it being the local road network for local authorities to undertake. The guidance permits for that to to be taken forward. And equally on the rail network, where there is essential work identified, that work can be undertaken as well. If it's safety critical and also for maintaining and sustaining services, there is scope for that to be undertaken. And the risk assessment process, which trunk road maintenance contractors have and also which Network Rail have in place, is about assessing those particular issues to make sure that it is only been undertaken where it is viewed as being essential of nature to maintain access to the road network or to the rail network. So I can give the member that assurance. Should there be any change to construction guidance in these matters, which would allow for other works to be undertaken in the construction side, including in major transport projects, we will of course give consideration to that. And I have officials presently reviewing all of our major transport projects to identify any changes in the guidance around construction which would allow some of these projects to start to become active again. So we are almost monitoring this on a daily basis and will continue to review that as the guidance moves forward around these issues.
Sarah Boyack, followed by Kenneth Gibson.
Can I welcome the Cabinet Secretary's announcement on speeding up the process of increasing space for walking and cycling to enable safe social distancing in the weeks and months to come? Will this money be able to address the specific issue of poor surfaces on our pavements and potholes on our roads, which do make walking unsafe for people with disabilities in particular and for cyclists on our roads? And can I welcome the fact that this is to be done speedily? Will he be monitoring the speed at which this £10 million is actually invested? Thank you.
Michael Matheson.
Presiding Officer, local authorities already have funding to deal with issues such as potholes, etc., which are on our existing road network, and I would encourage them to, if it's appropriate and it's essential, that they undertake that work, but that is a matter for each local authority. This fund is not for that purpose. This fund is for the very specific purpose of creating temporary cycleways and walkways for members of the public and for cyclists to make use of, while helping to support physical distancing and to be able to do so in a safe way. Many of the measures that they need to implement are of very low cost, and the funding is there to help to make sure that they have the opportunity to implement them as quickly as possible. And I would certainly want to see local authorities taking a bold opportunity here and to implement some bold plans that can make a real difference to people on their daily exercise journey or where they're commuting or travelling, to be able to use active travel in a safe and viable way.
Kenneth Gibson, followed by Maurice Corrie.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I welcome the additional £49.7 million being provided by the Cabinet Secretary to support Scotland's ferry services, an action which re-emphasises the Scottish Government's commitment to our island communities. However, last week the Caledonian Isles had to go to Aberdeen for repairs, having again broken down as it has several times already this year. The vessel was operating only a reduced service due to the pandemic. Had we been in a normal year, there would have been a major difficulties getting people, goods and vehicles to and from the Isle of Arran. How can the Cabinet Secretary reassure islanders that CalMac will be able to provide a reliable service going forward, given recent events?
Michael Matheson.
Presiding Officer, the member will be aware there is effectively a significantly reduced timetable in place for CalMac services. The passenger numbers for CalMac services has dropped by in the region of 96% of what it would be at this point in any other given year. So there is a significant level of additional capacity within the system because of the reduced timetable and reduced passenger numbers. But I can assure the member in terms of reliability and reliance issues that these are matters which we consistently raise with CalMac to ensure that they are putting the necessary measures in place to address any technical issues that may arise as quickly as possible, and also to help to improve resilience on the network. And I can assure that the member's concerns in these matters, which he raises on a regular basis with ministers, are well recognised and will continue to be impressed upon at CalMac in our engagement with them.
Maurice Corrie, followed by John Mason.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. To help the operators in the sector better understand what financial support is available, will the Cabinet Secretary agree to publish details of the level of financial support being made available to the transport sector, broken down accordingly to rail, bus, aviation, and other modes of transport?
Michael Matheson.
Presiding Officer, the member will be aware that we have taken very swift measures in order to help to support the transport sector in a range of different modes to assist the financial challenges which they are facing. That changes as we go forward, depending on the nature of the services that we are expecting of them. But I can assure the member that we will keep Parliament updated when we are in a position to do so around the costs associated with these interventions.
John Mason, followed by Neil Findlay.
Thank you very much. I wonder if the Cabinet Secretary can say anything about how the rail system has been performing during lockdown, and particularly if rail freight has been making a positive contribution.
Michael Matheson.
The member will recognise that the level of service and passenger load on our rail network is at a much lower level than it would normally be. However, performance has been exceptionally good. It's up there at 98%, well exceeding what was the original franchise commitment of 92.5%. However, I do recognise that it's difficult to measure it given against the normal franchise agreement, given the lower passenger load and also the reduced services which are being provided. Specifically on the member's question around freight, what we have saw is that we have saw an overall reduction in freight. However, the reason for that reduction has been as a result of a reduction in demand for construction goods and for car vehicle transportation. What we have saw an increase in, though, within the overall freight picture, has been an increase in foodstuffs for supermarkets going by freight. So we are seeing an increase in the areas where there's an increase in demand for services such as foodstuffs, but where we have saw an economic decline, for example, in construction, where sites have come to a stop, car sales have come to a stop effectively, we are seeing a reduction in those areas of freight, which means overall there has been a reduction in freight, but we are seeing increases in some of the key areas that we'd like to see further growth in.
Neil Findlay, followed by David Torrance.
If we reduce capacity in our peak train services by 10 to 25%, we still wouldn't provide every passenger with a seat, never mind provide social distancing space. So what is the thinking about how we're going to provide the capacity to get people to work and safe spaces for staff and passengers? And isn't the danger in a region like the Edinburgh region that we transfer people back onto the roads and gridlock just gets worse?
Michael Matheson.
Presiding Officer, the reality is that you can't just switch the transport system back on, and while you are applying physical distancing, it is not possible to meet the demands that people may expect from our transport system. So, for example, a carriage may only be able to, a train carriage may only be able to carry a fifth of the normal passenger numbers that they would normally be expected to carry, while physical distancing has to be implemented. If a train leaves Waverley and it's heading to Glasgow, is that how do you manage passengers getting on the train and also the flow of passengers at different stations in between to make sure that we maintain any social distancing? So there are real challenges around being able to manage the demands that may be required on a rail network going forward, as there will also be on our bus network, with buses very often only being able to carry around a quarter of the capacity as to what they would normally be expected to carry, while social distancing has to be applied, which is why we all have a part to play. The transport system cannot simply pick up all of that demand while also meeting social distancing and physical distancing requirements. Therefore, businesses that can look at having staff continuing to work from home while social distancing is required need to continue to look at doing that. Means by which we can reduce the need for people to travel continue to have to be explored and to considered. Greater use of active travel for some people might be appropriate, but for someone coming from West Lothian into Edinburgh, it may not be appropriate for them. Therefore, if people simply jump into their cars, we will quite literally have gridlock because the cities will not be able to cope with that. That's why we're undertaking a significant amount of work to try and understand any changes that may be made to the existing restrictions which we have in place, however small they may be, is to assess what impact they would have on our transport system and to see where the transport system would be able to cope with that demand, given the need for maintaining physical distancing. So that's a very complex piece of work which my officials are involved in with colleagues in health and across other parts of government in looking at these issues. But I don't for 1 minute, Presiding Officer, I want to give the impression that this is going to be an easy thing to resolve. It will be very challenging and it will require us to have a new normal and a change of working in order to try to meet the ongoing challenges that are associated with maintaining physical distancing and its impact on the transport system.
David Torrance, followed by Jamie Halcrow-Johnson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can the Cabinet Secretary outline what engagement he has had with the UK Government regarding the systems that will be required at airports and other transport hubs as consideration is given to relaxing the lockdown?
Michael Matheson.
Presiding Officer, we have regular discussions with the UK Government, including at a ministerial level, which I've been directly involved in, which covers a range of various issues, including matters relevant to our aviation sector. As I mentioned earlier on in response to a question from Gordon Lyndhurst, is that we are in a position where there's further assessment work being undertaken by Health Protection Scotland, who are engaging with their counterparts in other parts of the UK to consider what further guidance may be required for any types of health checks that may have to be implemented in our airports. And as we look at any changes around the existing guidance for the existing lockdown arrangements, they will be reviewed to consider what extra measures may need to be put in place. So I can assure the member this is an area which we are giving consideration to, but we're also working with UK counterparts on it, because there needs to be a consistency across our airports in the UK and how we take these forward.
Jamie Halcrow-Johnson, followed by Angela Constance.
Thank you. The Cabinet Secretary in his statement referred to CalMac and Logan Air, but he didn't refer to Northlink Ferries and Pentland Ferries, who continue to deliver vital lifeline links for the Northern Isles and ensure that freight can still be shipped onto and off the islands. And clearly, with passenger revenue almost non-existent, there is a serious cost to these operators. So can I ask the Cabinet Secretary what financial concerns have been raised with him by these operators on these routes, and how the Scottish Government plan to respond to those concerns?
Michael Matheson.
Presiding Officer, we've had engagement with both the operators to discuss the financial implications it has for them, both at Serco and also with Pentland Ferries, and I can advise the member that we are providing them with support given the financial challenges which they are facing.
Angela Constance, followed by Andy Whiteman.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Companies such as Edinburgh Coach Lines, AA Coaches and Prentice Westwood in my constituency are very much the unsung heroes, given that they step into very difficult situations at short notice when other transport modes fail or just won't do. So I wonder what further consideration the Cabinet Secretary will give to more specific support for the coaching industry to ensure that they not only survive this pandemic, but that they can also help our communities thrive, and in particular help with community resilience, given their access to vehicles and highly skilled drivers. These companies want to help, and we should do more to help them to help us.
Michael Matheson.
Presiding Officer, I recognise the point as it was raised earlier on by Michelle Ballantyne in regard to the challenges which the coach sector are experiencing, and I can assure the member that my colleague Fergus Ewing and his tourism officials are engaged with the sector and looking at some of the specific challenges which they face as a result of the marked downturn within the tourism sector, particularly those who may have helped to support the cruise sector, where there has been a very significant drop-off in any demand for support from coach services. And I've got no doubt that my colleague Fergus Ewing will keep the Parliament updated on any progress that's made on these matters. In relation to the businesses which the member made reference to, we have had offers of over 160 different types of offers in terms of assistance in the transport sector, as I mentioned, from helicopters to planes to boats to vans to cars, and in the bus sector as well. If the businesses which the member made reference to wish to look at offering some specific support to the Scottish Government in meeting some of the challenges which we're facing at the present moment, if the member wishes to pass that information on to me, I will ensure that that's followed up with them and that we can contact the companies directly to explore those matters.
Andy Whiteman, followed by Graham Simpson.
Thanks, Presiding Officer. In the Cabinet Secretary's statement, he talks about the work with Sustrans being to ensure that people are able to travel during lockdown. And he also talks about writing to Scotland's local authorities, detailing a package of support for temporary measures. Can you clarify that this support is just for the lockdown, or will it continue into what we all anticipate to be a transition period when largely life will be back to normal, but will still require social distancing?
Michael Matheson.
Well, Presiding Officer, they are temporary measures for the purposes of during the period where we continue to have social distancing and physical distancing. So that, as we know, could be for a very extended period of time, for many months. So the intention is that this funding over the course of the next couple of months is to support local authorities to implement packages that can support people in choosing to make use of active travel while also supporting them to maintain social distancing. Now, it may be that as local authorities take some of this forward, that as we eventually move out of social distancing, some local authorities may choose to look at where they wish to continue with some of these temporary infrastructure arrangements to put in place on a permanent basis. That would be a matter which would be very much for those local authorities. And of course, there's a funding regime that we have in place to help to support active travel infrastructure which could be accessed for that purpose. But on a temporary basis, and to do it quickly, we are changing part of that fund to get funding to local authorities quickly to allow them to put these things in place, which means that they could be in place for the extended period for which physical and social distancing has to be maintained, which could be for many months ahead.
And the last question is to Graham Simpson.
Yeah, it was really to emphasise the same point that Andy Whiteman has just made, because if we're going to spend £10 million on measures to make it easier for people to cycle and walk, then I think you want to maintain that progress. If we've got more people cycling and the figures are impressive, we don't want to spend £10 million and then take away those measures and see things slip back. So perhaps the issue is the word temporary. So when the Cabinet Secretary is contacting councils, perhaps he ought to emphasise that these measures don't have to be temporary, they could be permanent.
Presiding Officer, I very much welcome that position from the Conservative Party, and I very much hope that will continue to be the position they take when it comes to permanent arrangements for removing road space in some of our towns and cities across the country, because that hasn't always been the position which, in fairness, they have taken on these matters. But I certainly welcome what appears to be a change in tone and approach to this matter in light of recent experience. I, of course, would like to see those behaviour changes being maintained and going forward, if that is the case. But it is funding which we're making available to assist local authorities to do this in very short order in order to help to support people where possible. Should they then wish to look at putting in permanent infrastructure, then of course there is a more detailed process that they have to go through because of the implications that would actually have in terms of the physical infrastructure and the process that must be gone through legally in order to implement physical to permanent infrastructure of that nature. But no doubt, views on that will be expressed as we go forward, and local authorities may choose to look at implementing them on a permanent basis. And those who have taken up cycling on a much more regular basis may choose to continue to cycle in the future, which I think would be a positive thing for us all. I know personally, Presiding Officer, I cycle much more now than I have for many years as a result of the quieter roads and the ability to get around more readily. So from that perspective, I think that's a positive element that we have experienced in the last couple of weeks in what has been a very challenging period. And this funding is to try to help local authorities to do the right thing in the immediate future to support people to walk and cycle safely while maintaining physical distancing.
That concludes questions on the transport statement, and we'll move on to the next item of business. And can I take the opportunity to remind members that social distancing... I think I'll maybe start again. It's just as well I'm not doing a 15-minute statement. Can I remind members that social distancing measures are in place and ask that you observe these measures, including when entering and exiting the chamber. Thank you.